Regardless of what the OKC Thunder does in the 2026 NBA Draft, they should still be considered at least co-favorites to win the championship next season. But that doesn't mean we should expect the Thunder to stay idle on draft night, especially with them owning the 12th, the 17th, and the 37th picks in what is considered to be a deep and loaded draft class. Well, no question, OKC ideally wouldn't choose to use all of those selections this year given the existing roster crunch they already have, so it might be a real option for the Thunder to consolidate their picks to potentially move up in the draft. Obviously, it's unlikely that the Thunder can trade up for someone like Dybantsa, Cam Boozer, or Darryn Peterson, since the top three teams in the draft, the Wizards, the Jazz, and the Grizzlies, already own stockpiles of future draft picks, making it unlikely they would give up the chance to draft a franchise-altering player even if OKC calls them with a massive trade offer based on picks. Instead, a more realistic scenario here for the Thunder would be a trade-up involving teams at the bottom half of the top 10, such as the Kings, the Hawks, the Mavs, and the Bucks, who are more likely to be attracted to gaining additional assets. But again, this is all contingent on the Thunder actually having a specific targeted player in mind. And within that mid-lottery range, I personally like the idea of the Thunder trading up for 6'4" combo guard Braden Burries, a player who should be able to contribute on both ends right from day one with his capabilities as a crafty 3-level scorer and as a hard-nosed defender. Or if he slides down to the middle of the lottery, I also like the idea of acquiring 6'6" Keaton Weigler, a big guard with elite processing ability and NBA-ready shot-making skills, who I think could also be a solid addition to the Thunder's current roster. But again, given the roster crunch that OKC is currently experiencing, it's also possible that they just trade one or both of their first-round picks this year in exchange for future first-rounders down the line. Although, we also shouldn't be surprised if the Thunder just goes full talent acquisition mode by using all their draft selections this year to add a couple players on cheap rookie contracts who could replace more expensive players on the roster. So for this video, I'm gonna stick with the scenario that's currently in front of us, and assuming that the Thunder choose to keep both their first round selections, I'm gonna dive into a couple prospects who I think could be solid additions to this already championship caliber Thunder roster. Well, historically, Sam Presti has tended not to draft players based on roster fit and has typically just selected the best player available. Although this year, I think OKC can actually hit on both fit and talent if they take Michigan forward Yaxel Lenderborg with the 12th overall pick. He's actually an older prospect who's already going to be 24 by the start of next season, and typically, lottery teams tend to select younger players with higher hypothetical ceilings, and Sam Presti himself has also usually followed this path in the past. But with OKC already in full-on win-now mode, maybe this could be the time Presti getting a ton of steals. All in all, in Michigan, Lenderborg averaged 1.1 steals and 1.2 blocks per game, but what's even more remarkable is how high both his steal and block rates were for a forward. His 2.3 steal percentage is even higher than that of Stephon Castle with UConn, and his 7.3 block percentage also tops that of Zach Edey and DeAndre Ayton during their college seasons. And the crazy thing is, Lenderborg put up those tremendous hustle numbers even without fouling a lot. He only committed 1.7 fouls per game, putting him in the 99th percentile of college basketball in terms of foul efficiency. In addition, Lenderborg also makes sure to end possessions, as he's such a good rebounder who's not afraid of throwing his weight around to snatch rebounds. He averaged 6.8 rebounds per game, which included 1.9 offensive rebounds, and that was despite spending most of his time on the floor alongside two bigger frontcourt players in Adai Mara and Maurice Johnson. Overall, Lenderborg is just a high-motor yet disciplined defender who the Thunder would be able to switch in both guards, wings, and even some bigs. He's got a strong build and yet he's quick enough in space, making him a player who you could scale up or scale down depending on the lineups that OKC would deploy. If the Thunder wants to go for an all-defense, all-switch type of lineup, they can deploy a 5-man unit of Cason Wallace, J-Dub, Caruso, together with Lenderborg and Chet at the frontcourt. But if they want to go big with Chet and Ihart on the frontcourt, then Lenderborg can slide down as a 3 and guard down in the perimeter. Basically, Lenderborg can be that big wing player who could give OKC different options and who can do it all on the defensive end, but who at the same time also wouldn't be a liability on the offensive end. Well, first off, the most straightforward way for Lenderborg to contribute to OKC offensively right from day one is as a floor spacer. In his 3 seasons playing Division I basketball, Lenderborg was a career 36.4% three-point shooter on 2.6 attempts per game. Although this past season playing for Michigan, he actually peaked at an excellent 37% from deep while also increasing his attempts to 4.5 per game. Well, the only concern I think here for Lenderborg is that he could be a streaky shooter, as there was a 16-game stretch in the middle of the season at Michigan when he converted just 28% of his three-point attempts, although he was able to bounce back by shooting 48% from deep in the last 16 games of the season. So obviously, the critical swing skill here for Lenderborg will be polishing his consistency to avoid any wild shooting swings at the NBA level. But the good thing here is that Lenderborg's solid touch from deep has also allowed him to probe closeouts and to create driving lanes to the basket. Well, Lenderborg has a functional handle, especially out of straight-line drives, and is really solid in terms of setting up jab steps and some stutter-rip moves to get his defender to move one way before he goes the other way. And with his explosiveness, he's really hard to stop once he gets near the rim. But I think what could really make Lenderborg stand out at the NBA level right off the bat would be his advanced ability as a passer and decision maker, which could be very useful for a Thunder team who thrives off having multiple playmakers on the floor. When probing the defense, Lenderborg always understands when the help is coming and where it's coming from, which allows him to create angles to get the ball to his teammates. Also, his massive hands allow him to control the ball quite well when he makes those swing passes out of tight angles. Well, Michigan also did run a lot of 4-5 pick and rolls wherein Lenderborg routinely made precise and well-timed passes to 7'3" Ade Mara in the interior where he can immediately catch the ball up top, which really makes me intrigued in terms of how Lenderborg as part of OKC could open up more easy opportunities for lob threats like Ihart or Chet. And also, the good thing about all of this is that Lenderborg rarely turned the ball over despite the passing production. In Michigan, he averaged 3.2 assists and just 1.1 turnovers per game, which equates to a 3.1 assist to turnover ratio, which is actually equal to that of what Lonzo Ball had in college. Well, with the Thunder, you obviously shouldn't expect Lenderborg to step in right away as a constant pick-and-roll creator, but given the decision-making and the quick processing ability, he should still be able to function as a reliable connective passer in OKC right off the bat. Though in the future, Lenderborg should be asked to run more reps with the ball in his hands at the NBA level, at least as a secondary creator. But I think that would all depend on how he adds more craft and dynamics to his handle, which still isn't the tightest right now, therefore limiting him in terms of creating consistent looks in the half-court in college. But then, despite the lack of consistent half-court self-creation, Yaxel was still able to convert 68.5% of his half-court attempts at the rim this past season, thanks to his ability to score off putbacks, make cuts to the basket, and run in transition. And aside from being a floor spacer, I think these are also the same ways he could be utilized in OKC's offense even without him having the ball in his hands. Again, going back to the rebounding, Lenderborg just out-muscles and out-hustles everyone when he's chasing the ball, and that has allowed him to convert 65.5% of all his putback attempts this past season. Lenderborg also thrives as an off-ball mover, using shifty back cuts and timely curls for him to catch lobs and slip passes, which has enabled him to shoot 82.4% on shots off cuts to the basket. Then in transition, he's also converted 76% of his shot attempts. On the open floor, Lenderborg is just really quick and capable of galloping past other players to do real damage at the rim. It's just hard to stop his dunks and loop finishes in transition, especially given his ability to control and maneuver his body even when moving at full speed. So overall, his blend of high-level athleticism and instinct should enable Lenderborg to be a great fit next to OKC's plethora of ball handlers who can set him up whether it be on the half-court or in transition. Well, again, the concern here for the Thunder when drafting Lenderborg is the risk of betting on his ceiling because he's already an older prospect. But even if the developmental arc doesn't grow much from here, for a Thunder team who's all set and winning with Lenderborg at the very least, OKC is still gonna be getting a big forward who has the size and the strength to play as a small ball center, but who also has the fluidity and playmaking to operate as a perimeter player. Basically, a guy in the mold of Aaron Gordon, OG Anunoby, or PJ Washington, who all have played important roles for teams who made the NBA Finals the past 4 seasons, which is also a player archetype that this version of the OKC Thunder still don't have in their roster. Moving on with the 17th pick in the draft, if it's still available, I like the idea of OKC drafting German big Han Steinbach from Washington, who I think would be a solid addition to a Thunder roster who gives a premium on physicality, disruption, and paint activity. Well, to me, Steinbach is almost like a Steven Adams clone, but is more athletic and more skilled. He's been a double-double machine in college, averaging 18.5 points and almost 12 rebounds a game, who's got solid size for an NBA big at 6'11" with a 7'2" wingspan. And while Steinbach's not an explosive vertical athlete, he's a high IQ big who's got strength, coordination, and enough athleticism to thrive on both ends of the floor for OKC right from day one. Well, first, let's start with the defensive end. What I really like here is that, same with the rest of OKC's bigs, Steinbach is comfortable being deployed on different coverages when guarding ball screens in the perimeter, whether it be on drop coverage, at the level of the screen, or even against some switches. When he's guarding on the drop, Steinbach understands angles really well and has always got good awareness of when and how to move in order to contain both the roll man and the ball handler. And when he plays more at the level of the screen, Steinbach keeps his feet moving whenever he's caught in space or in situations when he has to switch. Overall, he just moves really well laterally for a guy his size. There have been a ton of situations when he gets switched into a guard or a wing, and those players attacked him on a straight line drive thinking they can beat him off the dribble, only for them to get stifled with a block in the end, as Steinbach knows how to use his footwork and his wide body to funnel his man right exactly where he needs to get them. To me, his mobility for a big man is just so striking on the defensive end. There were a lot of instances when he was roaming in the paint, but then he would suddenly run to recover and make a closeout and a shooter in the perimeter. And in those kinds of situations, Steinbach is able to deploy his length and timing, enabling him to get some highlight-worthy blocks and jump shooters. Also, when guarding on the perimeter, he always appears to sit on a defensive stance while always keeping his hands wide, making it easy for him to swipe the rack out of ball handlers or to make some denials off passing lanes, which has resulted in Steinbach averaging 1.1 steals per game, which is a really good mark for a big man. So right off the bat, he should be able to provide a ton of defensive movement and activity off the bench for the Thunder. Although, when guarding the paint, I still wouldn't call Steinbach a defensive anchor in the mode of Chet Holmgren or Isaiah Hartenstein, who are just elite at that level. But regardless, Steinbach's still gonna be capable of acting as a positional help side shot blocker who has the ability to end possessions around the basket. Steinbach still averaged 1.2 blocks in college, and overall, he has good verticality and timing for a big man, which enabled him to deny any shot that comes into his vicinity. In addition, Steinbach carries solid weight and strength, which makes him extremely hard to move in the paint. He's got good balance and footwork when defending bigger players, which makes it hard for opponents to get around him or to establish their position around the basket. These characteristics give the Thunder another potential bruiser who could also develop into an above-average NBA-level rim protector, especially once Steinbach grows more into his frame, which is when he could become a potential Isaiah Hartenstein replacement once iHeart starts to decline. I can just easily envision Steinbach being a solid long-term frontcourt fit next to Chet Holmgren, as when playing alongside Chet, who's more of a roamer and an elite last line of defense, Steinbach can focus more on deploying his physicality, which should also allow him to maximize his most elite skill right now, which is his rebounding. Well, rebounding is one of the most translatable skills from the college level to the NBA, and last season, Steinbach's 11.8 rebounds per game led the entire Division I basketball. He's also posted a 25% defensive rebounding percentage, which actually happens to be the second best ever recorded in college basketball over the past 2 decades. And the crazy thing is, Steinbach has done this even without really outjumping players. Instead, he just does a great job of boxing out his man, using his length and timing to chase after the ball. Steinbach also averaged 4.2 offensive rebounds per game. He's really good at wedging his way into the lane and finding creases, which allow him to use his solid second jump to create second chance opportunities, which has allowed Steinbach to convert 60% of his putback attempts in college. So overall, Steinbach should give OKC a real legit rebounding big off the bench, which should be extremely valuable for a Thunder team who's lost some playoff games the past 2 years due to coming up short in the possession battle. But outside of putbacks, most of Steinbach's interior buckets usually come out of post-ups, rolls to the rim, or shots out of the dunker spot. He's still not a shot creator, and instead, Steinbach thrives at being a play finisher. Well, first, as a post player, Steinbach is excellent at sealing his man and making himself an easy target for teammates' entry passes. He's also got great hands, which allows him to catch everything in his area, and once he catches the ball, he's got great coordination and balance, which allows him to get his shot up in one motion. And even if he catches the ball further away from the basket, he's still capable of using floaters to finish the play. In addition, Steinbach also uses his body well to create open angles and to shield off defenders, while being capable of using up fakes to create separation, as well as to throw rim protectors off their timing. This has helped Steinbach average 5.3 free throw attempts per game in college, which is a solid number for a freshman big. Well, sure, the Thunder don't usually ask their bigs to primarily create from the post, but I think Steinbach's strength, touch, and footwork in this area should still allow him to exploit mismatches at the next level, while potentially unlocking another area of OKC's offense. But if anything, I think it's as a viable pick-and-roll option where Steinbach can immediately step in for the Thunder. As a pick-and-roll big, Steinbach just looks like a balanced bulldozer when he attacks the rim off a pass. Although he's still not the strongest screener, he understands when he should slip a screen to get into the paint, and he knows where and how to roll. His footwork on his rolls are terrific, and he knows exactly how to open his hips to create the best angles for his ball handler to find him. Well, Steinbach's mostly a below-the-rim finisher, but that barely matters because when he catches the ball off the roll, he compensates by taking advantage of his light feet, his soft touch, as well as his ability to contort his body to be able to finish layups off odd angles or even against contact. Overall, Steinbach converted 67.2% of all his rim attempts in the half-court in college, which is actually a solid number for a young big who had to find many of his opportunities in the paint. But then, the same light feet and coordination he displays in the half-court also translates when he runs the open floor. Well, sure, typical rim-running big man could glide down the floor, but Steinbach actually does so more fluidly and with more control than players his size, which makes him almost look like a wing when running and finishing in transition. But I think the next step here for Steinbach as a scorer is exploring more of his abilities as a driver and shot creator off short rolls or perimeter touches. While in college, Steinbach's already showed some flashes of being able to attack closeouts on the way to driving and finishing at the basket or at least around the paint, although still in low volume. Either way, there are endless possibilities here that OKC can explore with how they can utilize Steinbach on the offensive end, and another way is by deploying him as a connective passer. While in college, Steinbach wasn't really featured as a passing hub on the offensive end, but has definitely shown the vision needed to become a connective passer at the next level, as he was able to make timely reads out of short rolls or out of the post. And with OKC having a more balanced offensive structure with their blend of shooters and lob threats, I'm intrigued as to how Steinbach can potentially become a more operational passing hub as he develops this part of his game more. Well, for sure, the Thunder already have J. Will off the bench, who is a reliable big, and they also still have to see what they have in Thomas Sorber. But I think with Steinbach, there is the potential here for the Thunder to be adding a craftier, more agile, and higher ceiling big man. Although, how Steinbach scales up to that level will also depend on how good of an outside shooter he will become. Well, the good thing is, his shooting mechanics all look smooth, consistent, and repeatable, and in 30 games for Washington, he shot a reasonable 34% from deep. But then the problem was that it was just on low volume, with him attempting just 53 outside shots while converting 18 of those. Also, half of his attempts were off the pick-and-pop variety, wherein Steinbach was deliberately given ample time to get into his shooting motion. So I think the question here is, can Steinbach attempt 3-point shots on more volume at the next level against quicker closeouts? Or can he still maintain his percentages even when deployed more in the corners by OKC? Well, if the answer is yes, and if Steinbach develops more into a playmaker and not just a play finisher, given all the other things he already does in the floor really well, then I believe the Thunder could have someone who could emerge as a real starting caliber big man for the team in the long run, which might actually be a solid bet since he's only 20 years old. But even if Steinbach doesn't scale up enough, given his rebounding, his physicality, and his high IQ, the Thunder should still have a solid big man off the bench who they could play for a solid 20 minutes a game depending on the matchup. Well, within the 12 to 17 range of the draft, there are still other players who I think would be solid additions for the Thunder. One is 6'5" wing Cameron Carr from Baylor, who with his 7'2" wingspan could literally step in as a bigger, higher ceiling version of Isaiah Joe right off the bat. There's also Alan Graves from Santa Clara, a high IQ guy who's just an endless possession generator who also doesn't turn the ball over. But overall, I just like both Yaxel Lenderborg and Han Steinbach's fit with this current Thunder roster better, both in the present as well as in the foreseeable future. But who do you think should the OKC Thunder go after in the 2026 NBA Draft? Feel free to drop your thoughts in the comment section below, and again, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing as well. Again, this has been Rear Balls, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.